Cold, silent, unforgiving. These mountains never forget what humans do when hope is gone. I'm Professor Skullstein, historian of the dead. I tell the stories time tried to bury. In 1846, they sought a new life in California. What they found was hunger, madness, and death. All right then, let's open the pages of history and step inside the story.
In the mid-19th century, a great movement was sweeping across America. Thousands of settlers, driven by dreams of a better life, set their sights on the far west, to Oregon and California. It was called Manifest Destiny. The belief that Americans were destined to expand westward, to claim new land and build a new future. But the journey across the continent was long, dangerous, and often deadly. And among those who set out, one group would become a symbol of both courage and horror. They were known as the Donner Party. In the spring of 1846, a caravan of 87 men, women, and children departed from Illinois, heading west toward California. They were led by two brothers, George and Jacob Donner, and their companion, James Reed. With wagons, oxen, and supplies, they joined the long trail of pioneers moving westward along the Oregon Trail. At first, the journey was hopeful. The prairies were green, the skies wide and open. They sang around campfires, shared food, and dreams of fertile California valleys. But in July, the Donner Party reached a critical choice. At Fort Bridger, a remote trading post in present-day Wyoming, they faced two routes: the traditional Oregon Trail, long, proven, and safe, or a new route, recently proposed by a man named Lansford Hastings. Hastings claimed his path, called the Hastings Cutoff, would shorten the journey by 300 miles. He promised an easier route through Utah and Nevada, but he had never actually traveled it himself. Reed and the Donners debated. Some wanted to stay on the main trail, others argued for the shortcut. Eventually, hope and ambition won over caution. The Donner Party chose the new route. It was the decision that would seal their fate. At first, the path seemed promising, but soon they realized Hastings had lied. The so-called shortcut was a nightmare. They spent weeks cutting through thick forests in the Wasatch Mountains. The wagons broke down, the oxen weakened, and every mile forward cost them precious time. When they finally reached the Great Salt Lake Desert, their ordeal worsened. The desert stretched for miles, white, blinding, and lifeless. Hastings had said it could be crossed in 2 days. It took them 5. The heat was merciless. Their animals collapsed from thirst. Their wagons were abandoned, and by the time they emerged from the salt flats, they had lost many of their oxen, supplies, and strength. Autumn had arrived, and the group was far behind schedule. Food was scarce. Morale was broken. Arguments erupted. In one violent clash, James Reed killed a man and was banished from the group. Still, they pushed forward. Ahead lay the Sierra Nevada mountains, the final barrier between them and California. They didn't know it yet, but winter was coming early. By late October 1846, the Donner Party reached the eastern slopes of the Sierra Nevada. Exhausted and weakened, they paused to rest, believing they still had time to cross the mountains. Then, the snow began to fall. At first, just a light flurry, but within days it became a blizzard. The mountain pass was buried, and the wagons could go no further. They were trapped. The group built makeshift cabins beside a frozen lake, today known as Donner Lake. 2 families, the Donners themselves, were forced to camp miles behind after one of their wagons broke an axle. Snow continued to fall, week after week. Soon it lay several meters deep. Their supplies ran out. The oxen were slaughtered and eaten. Then, nothing was left. Hunger set in. Desperation followed. They boiled leather, chewed on hides, even ate bark from trees, just to stay alive. But starvation cannot be denied forever. One by one, people began to die. And for those who remained, the line between life and death began to blur. In December, 15 of the strongest survivors, men and women alike, set out on foot to find help. They carried little food and makeshift snowshoes. They would later be known as the Forlorn Hope. For weeks they wandered through the frozen mountains. Snow blinded their path. The cold gnawed at their skin. One by one, they fell. When starvation became unbearable, they made an unthinkable choice. They began to eat the dead, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer will to live. Some accounts say 2 Native American guides were killed for food. Others deny it. But one truth remained. Only 7 of the 15 ever made it out alive. When they stumbled into a small settlement in California, they were skeletal, frostbitten, barely alive. Yet their arrival carried a message of hope and horror. A rescue must be sent, or everyone left behind would die. News of the disaster reached California in January 1847. 4 rescue parties were organized over the following months. Each had to battle blizzards, avalanches, and exhaustion to reach the stranded families. When the first rescuers arrived at Donner Lake, they were met with silence. Cabins buried in snow, corpses frozen where they had fallen, and eyes, hollow eyes, staring from the shadows. Some survivors had survived by eating the flesh of the dead. Others had refused and died instead. Over the next 3 months, rescue teams brought out as many as they could. Each trip was slow and perilous. Many of the rescued were children, carried on the rescuers' backs through snow and wind. By the time the final rescue party reached the camps in April, only one man was still alive, surrounded by bones and the remains of those who hadn't made it. Of the original 87 pioneers who had set out, only 48 survived. When word of the Donner tragedy spread across America, it shocked a nation. At first, newspapers struggled to believe the reports of cannibalism, but eyewitnesses confirmed the truth. The public reaction was a mix of horror, pity, and fascination. The Hastings cutoff, the shortcut that doomed them, was never used again. Over time, the Donner story became more than a tale of misfortune. It became a warning about arrogance, about the perils of ambition, and the limits of human endurance. Those who survived rebuilt their lives in California. They married, raised families, but none ever forgot that winter in the Sierra Nevada. Today, the site of their camp is marked by a memorial, a monument to the pioneers who dreamed of a new beginning and paid the ultimate price. Pause. The Donner Party remains one of history's most haunting stories, a story of hope and tragedy, of faith and fear, of humanity, and what we become when survival is all that's left.